All right, let's dive into the world of malicious software, or malware. You've probably heard the saying, know your enemy, right? Well, in cybersecurity, that's not just a cool line. It's pretty much rule number one for staying safe out there.
So, we've all been there. Your computer is acting sluggish, something just feels off. And what's the first thing someone says? Oh, you've probably got a virus. But is that really what's going on? Is every single bad thing that can happen to your computer actually a virus?
The short answer? A big fat no. And look, this isn't just about being technically correct. Knowing the difference is actually super important, because each of these threats works in a totally different way, and that changes how you fight them.
Okay, so let's start with the OGs, the ones that basically started this whole mess: viruses and worms. These two are the classics, and honestly, their methods created the playbook for almost everything that came after.
Think of a computer virus, kind of like the flu. It needs a host to survive. So it latches onto a legitimate file, a program, a document, whatever. But here's the key. It's totally powerless until you run that infected file. The moment you do, boom, the virus wakes up and starts looking for other files to infect.
Now a worm is a whole different beast. It's completely self-sufficient. It doesn't need a host file, and more importantly, it doesn't need you to click anything or run anything to help it spread. It's smart enough to find weaknesses in a network and just go, replicating itself all on its own.
So let's put it this way. A virus is like a hitchhiker. It can't go anywhere unless you give it a ride by opening its infected file. A worm, on the other hand, has its own car, a full tank of gas, and a map of the entire network. Once it gets in, it's off to the races, spreading everywhere, automatically.
And if you want a real-world example of just how much damage a worm can do, you don't have to look much further than one of the most famous cyber attacks of all time, the I Love You worm. You might know it as the love bug.
The whole thing was brilliantly simple and absolutely devastating. Back in 2000, millions of people got an email with a very tempting subject line: I love you. Who wouldn't open that? But inside was an attachment that, once clicked, overwrote your personal files. But the real genius here was that it then immediately mailed itself to everyone in your address book. This thing went global in just a matter of hours.
So, the game evolves. We've gone from malware that just tries to spread everywhere to something way more subtle, something built on deception. And that brings us to our next major player, the Trojan.
You know, while a worm is loud and causes a ton of chaos, a lot of modern hackers prefer a quieter approach. They want to be sneaky, and that's exactly why Trojans have become their go-to tool. The entire game is about trickery. The name says it all, right? It comes straight from the myth of the Trojan horse. A Trojan is a piece of malware that's disguised as something useful, something you actually want. A free game, a PDF reader, even a fake antivirus tool. You willingly let it into your system, and only then does it show its true colors.
Here's a super common example. You're on a website, and suddenly a pop-up screams, "Warning, your PC is infected." It offers you a free program to clean everything up. You panic a little, you click run, and oops, that cleaner was the Trojan. You've just rolled out the welcome mat for an attacker.
And what a Trojan can do is the stuff of nightmares. We're not just talking about deleting files. It can install a backdoor so attackers can come and go as they please, a rootkit to hide itself so deeply your system doesn't even know it's there, or a RAT, a remote access Trojan, that gives an attacker total control. They can see your screen, read your messages, steal your passwords, all in complete stealth.
And this is exactly why Trojans are so tough to stop. Your firewall can't protect you from yourself. If you willingly download something, it assumes you want it. The Trojan isn't really bypassing technology, it's bypassing your brain. It's hacking your trust.
So you've got the raw spreading power of a worm and the sneaky deception of a Trojan. What do you think happens when the bad guys figure out they can have the best of both worlds? Well, that's when you get the true monsters of modern malware.
This is the basic formula behind almost every major threat we see today. Malware isn't really in these neat little boxes anymore. Attackers are mixing and matching tactics to build these incredibly sophisticated hybrid threats that are way more dangerous than the originals.
So what does that actually look like? Well, a hybrid might trick you into running it, just like a Trojan. But the second it's active on your computer, it flips a switch and unleashes its inner worm and starts spreading across the network to other machines, all on its own. And when these hybrid monsters infect thousands or even millions of computers, they can all be linked together to create something absolutely massive, a botnet.
The best way to think of it is as a giant global zombie army of computers all waiting for a command from a single master.
So each one of those zombie computers is called a bot. The attacker pulling all the strings is the bot master. And from their secret command and control servers, that bot master can order their entire army to do pretty much anything, send spam, steal data, or launch attacks so big they can knock major websites offline. The scale is just mind-boggling.
Okay, we've gone from the classics to the modern monsters, but let's bring it all back home. Why does knowing the difference between all these things actually matter to you? How does this help keep you safe?
It really comes down to this. If you understand the core action, you understand how to defend against it. Viruses infect, so we have to be careful about the files we open. Worms spread, so network security is critical. Trojans trick, so we have to be skeptical. And hybrids combine all of this, which means our defenses have to have layers. That's really the main takeaway.
So now you know your stuff. You can tell a virus from a worm from a Trojan. You know their names, but the real question is, with this knowledge, will you be able to spot their traps out in the wild? That's the real challenge. And now you're better equipped than ever to face it.
All right, today we're going to dissect one of the most dreaded threats in the digital world, ransomware. And this isn't just about a lone hacker in a basement. We're talking about a highly organized, incredibly effective form of digital extortion. And the stakes? Well, they couldn't be higher. This isn't some theoretical problem you read about. Ransomware attacks have absolutely devastating real-world consequences. We've seen them bring hospitals, police forces, and yes, even entire city governments to a grinding halt. So, what is this stuff really? The best way to think about it is like a digital kidnapping. Ransomware is this nasty piece of software that hunts down your most important files, your photos, your documents, your company's entire database, and it locks them up tight with military-grade encryption. And the only way to get the key? You guessed it, you have to pay the attackers. Your data literally becomes a hostage. But how does this digital kidnapper even get into your system in the first place? Well, here's the thing. It almost never kicks down the door. Instead, it tricks you into opening it wide and inviting it right in. The number one way they do this is with a classic strategy that's been given a high-tech makeover, the Trojan horse. The ransomware disguises itself as something totally harmless, and then it relies on a bit of psychological manipulation, what we call social engineering, to get you to let your guard down and open the gates. And the trap itself is deceptively simple. It all starts with a message, right? An email, a text, something designed to make you act without thinking. Maybe it looks like an urgent invoice or a shipping notification for a package. The second you click that link or open that attachment, that's it. The Trojan executes and the ransomware starts doing its dirty work silently in the background. Now, once the attackers are in, they have two main ways of putting the squeeze on you to force a payment. It's not always about just locking your files anymore. Sometimes it's about threatening to expose them to the world. So you've got two main pressure tactics. The classic one is file encryption, where you're simply locked out of your own data. But a newer, and honestly a more terrifying method, is data theft and the threat of a leak. Here, they steal your sensitive info and threaten to dump it all on a public website unless you pay up. So think about it this way. One is a crime of denial. The other is a crime of total exposure. This image just perfectly captures that first method, doesn't it? Your entire digital life, your work, your personal memories, your business's core operations is suddenly wrapped in chains. Everything is still technically there, you just can't get to any of it. And the attackers? They're holding the only key. But we need to go a little deeper here, because modern ransomware is so much more than just a piece of code. It's the face of a very sophisticated and often very patient criminal enterprise. And these are the kind of tactics they use. This isn't a random smash and grab. The really dangerous attackers are patient. They'll get inside a network and just watch. They'll study the data to figure out the absolute maximum ransom the victim can possibly afford. Then, they hunt down and destroy the backups to make sure there's no way out. And of course, payment is always demanded in cryptocurrency, making it almost impossible to trace. This is a cold, calculated business model. All of this brings us to the one question everyone asks when they hear these horror stories. What can you actually do once it happens? What does recovery even look like? Let's just put it out there, plain and simple. After the attack, once your files are locked up or stolen, is there any going back? can you reverse the damage? And here it is. This is the single most important thing to take away from all of this. Without a clean, disconnected, offline backup, getting your data back is incredibly hard, if not flat out impossible. See, any backup that's still connected to the network can be found and encrypted right along with everything else. That offline copy, it's your only true lifeline. So, we'll end with a question for you to really think about. We all know our data is valuable, right? Whether it's priceless family photos or a company's financial future. The real question is your defense plan actually ready for the day a digital kidnapper comes knocking? Is it ready for a true hostage situation? Today, we're decoding the secret language your computer uses when it's in trouble. Think of these as the telltale signs, the little cries for help that your devices send out when they're infected with malicious software. So let me ask you, have you ever had that feeling that your computer is just off? You know, it's acting weird, it's slow, but you just can't quite put your finger on why? Well, that little feeling, that might be your device trying to send you a serious warning. So let's dive right in. All those strange behaviors are basically clues. And for the next few minutes, we're going to put on our digital detective hats and learn exactly how to spot the signs of malware. Okay, our first category of clues is all about those things that just pop up out of nowhere and interrupt you. These are usually the most obvious signs because they just appear without any warning and totally demand your attention. And I'm not just talking about regular annoying ads. If you're suddenly seeing all these weird pop-ups, like those fake virus warnings trying to scare you into clicking something, that could very well be a Trojan trying to sneak onto your system. Now here's a much more subtle clue: random sounds. You see, some malware is smart enough to block the visual error message from appearing, but not the little warning beep that comes with it. So if you hear a mysterious sound for no reason, your computer might be warning you about something it can't show you. All right, let's move on to our second set of clues. And this is all about performance. This is when you notice your device isn't just acting a little weirdly, it's actually struggling to do its basic job. If your machine, which used to be lightning fast, is suddenly crawling at a snail's pace, that is a major red flag. Malware, especially stuff like Trojans and spyware, loves to run in the background, just eating up your computer's memory and power. And that, of course, slows everything else down. And another big performance issue is suddenly running out of storage space. I mean, if a huge chunk of your hard drive just vanishes into thin air, it could be a self-replicating virus or a worm, and it's just filling up your drive with endless copies of itself. Now, for our third category of clues. This is where your computer seems to take on a life of its own. I'm talking about the signs where your device starts doing things that you definitely did not ask it to do. This is a classic. Your friends start texting you, asking why you're sending them all this weird spam from your email or social media. It's a really common malware tactic because, let's face it, you're much more likely to click a link from someone you know, right? And that's how the infection spreads. Okay, this one's a little creepy. Your computer just starts trying to connect to websites you have never heard of. This could be a really bad sign that your device has been turned into what's called a bot, and it's trying to phone home to a criminal server to get instructions. You know, some of these viruses are actually programmed for self-preservation. It's kind of smart in a scary way. If you suspect something's wrong and you try to download an antivirus program but you can't, that's a huge warning. The malware is probably defending itself by blocking the very tools you need to remove it. So let's get to our final and frankly most serious category of clues. This is where the threat goes way beyond just being an annoyance or a performance problem and becomes a direct danger to your personal files and your data. Imagine this. You go to open an important document and it's just gone. Or maybe the file is there, but all the content has been changed. Malware of all kinds can be incredibly destructive, sometimes deleting your files, messing with them, or just making your data vanish completely. In all of this brings us to one of the most infamous and damaging types of malware out there today, ransomware. It's not complicated. It's digital extortion, pure and simple. So the ultimate goal of ransomware is to encrypt your files, basically scrambling them so you can't read them. It can lock you out of your entire system, making your computer totally unusable until you pay up. Now, this isn't just some abstract threat. It happens all the time. Let's open up a real-world case file to see exactly how these criminals operate. This case really shows how attackers use psychology against us. The criminals behind this ransomware, called COVIDlock, They exploited the global fear around the pandemic. They hid their malware inside emails that promised crucial information about the disease. And the moment a victim clicked, the trap was sprung. The ransomware got onto their Android phone and immediately started encrypting their personal data. We're talking photos, contacts, messages, holding all of it hostage. And here was the criminals' endgame. To get their own data back, victims were told they had to pay a ransom of $100 for every single device that was infected. It's a pretty stark example of how these attacks work. Okay, so you know the clues, you know what to look for, but what do you actually do if you spot one? Well, your most powerful tool is awareness, and then a quick response. So let's take that spam clue we talked about. If that happens to you, here are 3 things you need to do immediately. First, log out of your accounts everywhere. Second, create brand new strong passwords. And finally, turn on 2-factor authentication. It makes it so much harder for anyone to get back in. You see, being a digital detective really just means paying attention. Your devices are constantly talking to you through their performance, through their behavior. So the final question is pretty simple. Are you listening? You know, when you hear the term cyber attack, your mind probably jumps straight to money, right? Some hacker trying to get your credit card details. But what if the reason for an attack isn't about cash at all? What if it's something way more destructive or just plain weird? Okay, let's dive into the real motives behind malicious software. So yeah, why build a weapon made of code? It's a really powerful question when you think about it, because when you strip away all the technical jargon, that's exactly what some malware is. It's a weapon. But a weapon for what? Well, the answer, it's a lot more complicated than you might think. And I know, that sounds like something straight out of a movie, but it's real. Just look at the Stuxnet virus. It was engineered with one single terrifying goal: to make a nation's most sensitive machinery literally tear itself to pieces. This showed that a cyber attack could leap out of the digital world and cause actual physical destruction. So here's our game plan. First, we're going to get past the idea that it's all about money. Then, we'll map out the different motives for different malware. We'll cover the whole spectrum from simple mischief to all-out mayhem. And we'll finish with a modern hacking mystery that is still a real head-scratcher. Right, so let's get into it. And it really is not just about the money. Now, don't get me wrong, most cyber attacks are about getting paid. But the really interesting ones, the ones that actually change the rules of the game and keep the security pros up at night, they often have absolutely nothing to do with cash. Stuxnet is the perfect chilling example of this. This was not some digital bank heist. This was an act of cyber warfare. It wasn't designed to steal information, it was designed to destroy physical hardware. The motive was pure geopolitical sabotage. And it proved, without a doubt, that a few lines of code could be just as dangerous as a physical bomb. Okay, so let's start mapping this stuff out. Think of this next part as a kind of rogues gallery, where we'll look at different digital threats and what really drives each of them. First up, we've got the most straightforward one, ransomware. It is basically a digital hostage situation. Your files get locked up, and the attackers demand money to give you the key back. The motive here is almost always cold, hard cash. It's simple, it's direct, and man, is it effective. I'm sure you've seen a screen like this before. It's terrifying. All your stuff is encrypted, your business is at a standstill, and there's this scary countdown timer. Pay up or it's all gone forever. It's all about creating intense pressure for one reason, and one reason only, to get you to pay. Next, we have spyware, the digital eavesdropper. This one's a lot sneakier. Its goal is just to gather information. It sits quietly on your machine, logging every single thing you type, your passwords, your bank details, everything. And that info, it can be used to empty your accounts or, maybe even worse, to plan a much, much bigger attack down the road. Then you've got worms. These are all about causing chaos on a massive scale. A perfect example is the Mirai worm. It was wild. It didn't go after big computers. It infected everyday things, like your security camera or your smart speaker. It turned all these little devices into a giant zombie army, a botnet, and used them to take down huge sites like Twitter, Spotify, and Netflix. And of course, we have to talk about the Trojan. Yep, just like the story of the Trojan horse, the entire motive is deception. It shows up looking like something you want, something harmless, and you willingly let it in. And once it's past your defenses, that's when it reveals its true malicious purpose. And that's the thing about Trojans. They're like the hacker's Swiss Army knife. They're not just one kind of threat. They're a delivery system for other threats. A Trojan can be used to steal your info, install some nasty ransomware, or even turn your computer into part of a botnet for a DDoS attack. Basically, its motive is whatever the bad guy wants it to be that day. All right, now for the classic, the computer virus. These are fascinating because their motives are all over the place. We're talking about a huge spectrum here, from simple mischief all the way to absolute mayhem. I mean, just look at this comparison. On one side, you've got Stuxnet, a literal weapon of war. And on the other, the Christmas virus from way back in 1987. Its whole purpose was, well, just for fun. It displayed a little holiday message, but oops, it spread so aggressively that it accidentally took down massive servers. A prank gone wrong, you could say. And then you have viruses that are just built to destroy. That's their only goal. The CIH virus, also known as the Chernobyl virus back in '98, wow, it was terrifying. It didn't want your money or your data, it just wanted to cause damage. It would wipe critical information, and in some cases, it would even destroy the physical hardware of the computer itself, literally turning it into a paperweight. Okay, this brings us to our last stop, and honestly, it's the most mysterious one. Let's talk about the hacker's enigma and the really strange case of the Capital One data breach. This one has everything you'd expect from a huge hack, except for a motive that makes any sense. So let's just run through the timeline. In July 2019, Capital One realizes they've had a massive breach, a ton of credit card applications gone. The investigation starts, but the stolen data never shows up for sale on the dark web. That's weird. Then they find the hacker, Paige Thompson. And get this, they find her because she posted the files she stole on GitHub. She never even tried to hide. So you see why this is so bizarre, right? We're talking about hundreds of thousands of personal records, hugely valuable stuff. But the data was never sold, never used for anything. The hacker, a former Amazon employee, clearly knew what she was doing. She saw a server was misconfigured and went for it. But then, she never tried to make a dime off of it. She basically announced what she'd done to the whole world. So what was the point? Was it some kind of warning to the company? A mistake? Was she just showing off? We just don't know. To this day, there's no clear motive. It's a total enigma, a real puzzle that just doesn't fit with anything else we've talked about. So when you pull it all together, you can see that the reasons behind this stuff are just all over the map. You've got your straightforward financial gain, like with ransomware. You've got your large-scale disruption and even warfare, like with Stuxnet. And then you have this whole other category, mystery and mischief, like the Capital One hack. And that kind of leaves us with one last question to chew on. In this digital world we all live in, which is more dangerous? The hacker whose motive you understand, or the one you don't? It's one thing to build a defense against someone who just wants money, but how on earth do you protect yourself from someone when you have no idea what they even want? It's a pretty chilling thought.
So let's talk about the single biggest weak spot in pretty much any cybersecurity setup. And no, it's not some super advanced virus or a top secret government hacking tool. It's actually something way, way closer to home.
All right, let me ask you this directly. When you think about a massive security breach, what's the first thing that pops into your head? Some brilliant, complex piece of code, right? A flaw in the hardware, maybe? Just give that a thought for a second.
Well, the answer, as it turns out, is a lot simpler and honestly, a lot more personal. It's not the technology, it's not the firewall, it's not the software. It's the people using it. Yep, it's you and it's me. It's us.
And look, this isn't just some small little detail. Dealing with this human factor is so critical that a lot of experts call it the #1 line of defense against cyber attacks. So what happens when that first line of defense crumbles? Let's look at a huge real-world example.
To really see the kind of damage we're talking about, we have to go back to 2017 and look at the WannaCry attack. This wasn't just some small-time hack, you guys. This was a full-blown global catastrophe.
The scale of this thing was just mind-boggling. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of computers infected in over 150 countries, and it all happened in just a matter of hours. It was crippling hospitals, businesses, you name it. And here is the absolute kicker. This entire global crisis, all that chaos and all that damage, was completely preventable. You see, Microsoft had already released a security patch 2 whole months before the attack that would have stopped WannaCry dead in its tracks. The failure wasn't the technology, it was a simple human factor. Organizations just didn't get around to updating their systems.
Okay, so that was a massive failure on an organizational level, for sure. But we don't need to look at giant companies to see this human element in action. It actually affects us on a personal level every single day. So let's dive into some of the common habits that make us all vulnerable.
The good old password. We've all done it, right? Using something like password123 or our pet's name. Or even worse, using that same simple password for literally every website we log into. This is what the pros call poor password hygiene. And honestly, it's like leaving your front door wide open with a welcome mat out for hackers.
But it's not just about passwords. Take a look at this list of other risky habits. I mean, think about that free piece of software you downloaded the other day. Did you really check the source, or did you just click install because you wanted it right then and there? Every time we do that, we are essentially rolling the dice with our own data.
And this brings us to a really modern problem, using the coffee shop as your office. Yeah, it's convenient, but you're basically surrounded by risks. That public Wi-Fi can be a huge security hole, and all it takes is one person to casually glance over your shoulder, what they call shoulder surfing, to grab your password as you're typing it in.
So, up to this point, we've mostly been talking about accidental mistakes. But here's where it gets way more intense. Attackers don't just sit around waiting for us to mess up. They actively manipulate our human nature to create the errors themselves.
A perfect example is something called a business email compromise attack. It's basically a masterclass in psychological manipulation. Imagine this. An attacker pretends to be a trusted source, like, say, your CEO, and sends you a super urgent email demanding an immediate money transfer. They're betting on the fact that you're not going to question a direct order from the boss.
So how in the world do you stop an attack that sophisticated? Well, the solution is surprisingly low-tech. Think of it as real-life two-factor authentication. You literally just pick up the phone. A quick call to confirm, hey, did you really just ask for all this money, can prevent a total financial disaster. It's that simple.
So the really important thing to get here is that this goes way beyond just pretending to be a CEO. Attackers are weaponizing our basic human emotions. Our desire to be helpful, our fear of getting in trouble, our tendency to panic under pressure. Those are the exact vulnerabilities they're looking to exploit.
You've probably seen a scam just like this one. You get an urgent text or a phone call supposedly from your power company threatening to cut off your service if you don't pay up right now. They aren't hacking your firewall, they are hacking your sense of panic. They're trying to force you to act before you've even had a second to think it through.
Now, I know this all might sound a little bit scary, but here's the empowering part. If we are the biggest vulnerability, well, that also means we are the most powerful solution. You, the person, are the first and the most important line of defense.
At the end of the day, no firewall, no antivirus program can stop you from clicking on a bad link or falling for a clever scam. Technology is just a tool, and it's not foolproof, because attackers are targeting our humanity, our awareness, and our ability to think critically are the most important shields we've got.
So let's end on this note. As you go about your day today, just try to be more mindful. Before you click that link, before you open that attachment, just pause for a second and think. Because in the world of cybersecurity, the most powerful tool you have isn't your antivirus software, it's you.